Georgia, 1991. The Soviet Union is collapsing, and across its former territories, new nations are struggling to be born. In Tbilisi, the capital of Georgia, thousands gather in the streets. Some are celebrating independence, and others are preparing for war. At the center of it all stands one man, Zviad Gamsakhurdia, Georgia's first democratically elected president. Within months, he'll be hiding in a bunker beneath the parliament building while rockets rain down on the capital. His allies will abandon him, his enemies will burn the city, and Georgia will descend into a civil war that will last for years. This is the story of how a democratic revolution became a violent coup and how one man's rise to power destroyed the country he claimed to love. For decades, Georgia had suffered under Soviet rule. Stalin, himself a Georgian, had been particularly brutal to his homeland. Nationalist movements were crushed. Agriculture was forcibly collectivized. Anyone who opposed the regime was purged. Even after Stalin's death, Georgia remained tightly controlled from Moscow. But by the 1970s, something was changing. Nationalist feelings were growing, economic problems were mounting, and the people were getting angrier. On April 9, 1989, everything erupted. Thousands of Georgians gathered in Tbilisi to protest Soviet rule. The authorities responded with violence. 21 people died. Opposition leaders were arrested. Among those arrested was Zviad Gamsakhurdia, a former dissident who had spent years fighting the Soviet regime. He became a symbol of resistance. And when the Soviet Union began allowing multi-party elections in 1990, Gamsakhurdia was ready. In October 1990, Gamsakhurdia's coalition, called the Round Table, won a majority in the Supreme Council. For the first time in 69 years, the Communist Party had lost power in Georgia. But victory came with a price. The opposition that had united against the Soviets immediately fractured. By May 1990, nationalist groups were already splitting into competing factions. Street demonstrations, rallies, and hunger strikes began almost immediately. Still, Gamsakhurdia pushed forward. In April 1991, Georgia declared independence from the Soviet Union. The following month, Gamsakhurdia was elected president with 86% of the vote. Parliament granted him extraordinary powers. He could veto any law, he could declare war and martial law, he could appoint the prime minister, the chief judge, the prosecutor general, and the military commander. He had total immunity. But it didn't take long for things to start going wrong. In early 1991, Gamsakhurdia created the National Guard, a force meant to recruit 20,000 soldiers under the Ministry of Internal Affairs. At the same time, he moved to shut down the paramilitary groups that had emerged across Georgia. In February, the ministry arrested 10 members of the opposition National Democratic Party. Then they arrested 56 members of the Mechedrioni, a powerful paramilitary group, including its leader Jaba Yosliani. The charges were illegal possession of weapons. Tensions exploded in August. During a session of the Supreme Council, Gamsakhurdia got into a verbal argument with Vaja Adamia, leader of the Merab Kostava Society. Adamia resigned in September, taking his organization into the opposition. 3 ministers followed, including Prime Minister Tengiz Sigua. They accused Gamsakhurdia of becoming a, quote, totalitarian demagogue. Then came the August coup attempt in Moscow, an event I have made a video about that you can check out here. And if you're enjoying the video so far, you can leave a like and subscribe to the channel. I would really appreciate that. Hardliners in Russia tried to seize power and ordered all Soviet republics to disband their armed forces. Gamsakhurdia refused. He dismissed Tengiz Kitovani, the commander of the National Guard, and moved the troops under the Ministry of Internal Affairs to protect them. Kitovani didn't take it well. He left Tbilisi with 15,000 armed men and set up camp at the Rekoni Gorge, north of the capital. Tengiz Sigua and former Foreign Minister Georgy Koshtaria joined him there. Gamsakhurdia responded by banning the Communist Party, converting the local KGB bureau, and establishing a National Security Council. Georgia was splitting apart. On September 2nd, 1991, the first clashes began. Protesters demanding the release of Jaba Yuseliani were beaten with batons. Soldiers fired into the crowds. Barricades went up across Tbilisi. 27 political parties signed a petition demanding Gamsakhurdia's resignation. On September 9th, Gamsakhurdia created the Defense Ministry and brought the National Guard under his personal control. He arrested opposition politicians, accusing them of organizing the barricades. On September 21st, government supporters launched an assault to clear Rustaveli Avenue. The next day, dozens of hunger strikers in front of Parliament were violently dispersed by presidential guards and women loyal to Gamsakhurdia. That night, things turned deadly. 5,000 Gamsakhurdia supporters stormed the headquarters of the National Democratic Party, where they faced 800 opposition members. On September 23rd, Kitovani's forces entered Tbilisi and seized the television station. The next day, Gamsakhurdia declared a state of emergency. On September 25th, rebel units of the National Guard tried to take over a power station. They were driven back by police. 4 people died. By the end of September, Tbilisi was a divided city. Each side commanded between 1,000 and 3,000 soldiers. On October 3rd, the Georgian Orthodox Church brokered a temporary agreement. Kitovani's militia would withdraw from Tbilisi, but Kitovani didn't keep his word. He moved his forces to the Tbilisi Sea, just outside the city. The next day, opposition supporters rallied outside the Supreme Council. They were met by Gamsakhurdia's supporters. Armed clashes erupted. Government forces surrounded Kitovani's troops near Tbilisi Sea, but only minor skirmishes followed. On October 8th, during a Supreme Council session, Gamsakhurdia classified the events as a coup attempt. Kitovani remained on the outskirts of Tbilisi for the next 2 months. Both sides used the time to gather forces, search for weapons, and prepare for the battle ahead. On November 5th, Gamsakhurdia banned all political parties. He closed newspapers. He arrested opposition politicians. The final confrontation was coming. On the night of December 21st to the 22nd, the opposition made its move. Tengiz Sigua took over the Tbilisi hotel less than 250 meters from Parliament and turned it into a military headquarters for the opposition. Jaba Ioseliani brought detailed maps of the capital. Tengish Kitoani took command of the assault. Both sides blocked Rustaveli Avenue. Buses and armored vehicles sealed off the city's busiest area. Militia forces under Gia Karkarashvili secured northern access routes to prevent reinforcements from reaching Tbilisi. On the morning of December 22nd, the conflict erupted. Opposition forces positioned themselves in Alexandrov Park and opened fire on parliament. Last-minute negotiations collapsed when city officials were abducted by opposition troops. The first shots were fired after 7:30 in the morning. Rockets, grenades, and automatic weapons tore through the city. Nearby buildings were damaged. Rebels breached parliament twice, but were pushed back. Gamsakhurdia, inside the bunker of the parliament, had severed communications. It was a decision that would prove fatal. On December 23rd, another assault on parliament was repelled. Russian and Western media broadcast images of rocket launchers aimed at the building. The airport closed temporarily, and rumors spread that Gamsakhurdia would flee Georgia. By December 24th, missile fire echoed across central Tbilisi. The United States criticized Gamsakhurdia's human rights record and called for a peaceful resolution. Opposition leaders offered him safe passage in exchange for resignation. He refused. The final days of December were the most destructive. On the 27th, opposition forces penetrated parliament again and set parts of it on fire. On the 28th, they captured the former KGB headquarters in Gildani and freed political prisoners, including Jaba Ioseliani, who immediately resumed leadership of the Mechedrioni. Key government buildings burned. The National Bank, the Ministry of Internal Affairs, most of Georgia's Soviet-era state archives were destroyed. Casualties kept climbing. Defections increased. At the beginning of January, opposition forces seized the Tbilisi Broadcasting Tower. They declared the formation of a military council, dissolved the Supreme Council, and abolished the constitution. A curfew and state of emergency were imposed. From his bunker, Gamsakhurdia called on citizens to resist. He ordered nationwide mobilization, but no loyal forces answered. The military council claimed control over most local administrations. On January 3rd, thousands of Gamsakhurdia supporters tried to demonstrate peacefully. Militia gunfire dispersed them violently. Opposition leaders justified the crackdown as enforcement of emergency decrees. An ultimatum demanding Gamsakhurdia's resignation was issued and rejected again. By January 5th, opposition forces had fully surrounded parliament. Gamsakhurdia finally accepted defeat. In the early hours of January 6th, he escaped with his family and a small guard convoy. The opposition declared victory. Gamsakhurdia crossed into Azerbaijan, then Armenia, entering exile. The consequences of the coup would be felt throughout the 1990s in Georgia. The military council, in power in Tbilisi for another 2 months, created an authoritarian and militaristic regime across the country. Eduard Shevardnadze would become the head of Georgia in March 1992. He would spend several years establishing his power as he faced the military ambitions of both Tengish Kitovani and Jaba Ioseliani. Gamsakhurdia's departure marked the end of the coup but the beginning of a bloody civil war that would plunge Georgia into chaos until 1994, a civil war it never really recovered from. After a few months, Gamsakhurdia returned to Georgia, expelling the government forces in western Georgia and establishing an opposing government in Mingrelia. The fighting continued until his death on December 31st, 1993. According to a poll from 2020, 76% of Georgians believe the coup was bad for their country. Thanks for watching this video about the Georgian coup. If you enjoyed, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel, as well as checking out other videos that I have. I'll see you in my next video.